Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. Healing doesn't always come from having the answers or the closure you thought you needed. It comes when you stop waiting for someone else to fix it and start realizing you've had the strength all along to heal you on your own. Today on rSpace, you find your peace, not because someone else gives it to you, but because you discover it within yourself. He said I'd never survive without him. 2 years later, he's begging for money while I'm engaged to his millionaire cousin. I told the story on my YouTube channel months ago, but it didn't get any traction. People don't like trauma, I guess. There's already so much people are dealing with on a daily basis, I guess. So I thought I would share the story here instead. Maybe this is a much better platform to tell this kind of story on. Plus, your questions will help to generate more things to discuss on my channel. My best friend always says my life sounds like a fairy tale, but let me be clear, it wasn't. It was horrible. Yeah, I came out on top, thank God, but even now, I still get random bouts of anxiety when someone raises their voice, or when I feel like I have to explain myself too many times. That hysteria? That tightening in my chest? That's what he left me with. My therapist says I have a mild form of panic disorder, and even now, on some days, I have to remind myself that I am safe, that I am loved, that I am not crazy. I have to say all of that in front of the mirror, too. I was 23 when I met him. I was in my final year of university, and he was already working, 5 years older than me. Objectively, he wasn't the finest man you'd ever see on the street. He was an average height, but with a lovely jawline. He didn't dress flashy or act like the big boss, although I think he was a regional manager then. He worked, and still works in finance, but he had this calmness to him. Something about the way he carried himself made you feel protected, and back then, that was precisely what I needed, especially from the background he came from. He was intentional with me. No games, no second guessing, just consistent attention, love bombing now that I look back at it, but back then, it felt like everything I ever wanted. My friends said I was lucky. I mean, what 23-year-old girl wouldn't feel special when her man sends food to her hostel, picks her up after classes, and calls every night just to say he missed her? I remember the time I had a bad case of the flu during the exam season. He took time off work just to take care of me, brought me soup, rubbed my back, and even helped me wash my hair. It's straight off of K-drama. He spent all his weekends with me to the point that I didn't even have time to hang out with friends. But to me, I felt like he did that because he couldn't get enough of me. And what was the harm in that? It was just 2 days out of 7. And things like that convinced me I had found someone who loved me beyond reason. And maybe in some twisted way, he did. We dated for months before he proposed. We got married when I was 24. And honestly, the first year was okay. Nothing crazy. We argued a bit, sure, but I chalked it up to growing pains. You know, the usual newlywed stuff. He wanted things done a certain way, and I was still trying to find my feet. I tried my best to be the good wife, cooking, cleaning, dressing up, staying sexy, not being too demanding. That was the advice I was given from every angle. Don't nag, make your own peaceful, respect your husband. And I did. Lord knows I did. But slowly the shift began. He started getting cold. Our conversations dried up. I tried to talk to him and he'd act irritated, like I was disturbing him. Sometimes he would come home and sit silently, scrolling and watching TV while I made dinner. I'd ask how his day was. He'd repeat what he said the previous day. Ask what he wanted to eat. He'd say, whatever. At first, I thought he was just stressed from work. I was so delusional. He had changed jobs and the new one came with longer hours, a higher rank, and much more pressure. I tried to be understanding. I gave him space, picked up some of the housework, even started meal prepping so he wouldn't have to wait when he got back home. But then the emotional manipulation was heaped upon what I was already experiencing. He'd snap at me in front of his friends, make passive-aggressive jokes about how I was spending his money. Even though I had a job and contributed more than I should have, he started controlling things subtly, telling me what friends to avoid, what dresses were too revealing, and how I should speak when we're out in public. I didn't see it as control back then. I thought he was just looking out for me. The first time he told me I was too emotional, when I cried after he insulted me, I swallowed it. The first time he called me useless because I forgot to pay the light bill, I apologized because I didn't want to fight, because I thought if I did better, he'd return to being the man I fell in love with. He started threatening to leave during every argument, throwing words like, "You'll never survive without me," and "If I walk out, you'll come crawling." At first, it was shocking, but after a while it became routine. And that's the scariest part, the fact that emotional abuse can become routine. And where did I have to run for safety? My family is a story for another day, but I hate their guts. Going back would be like admitting I was a failure. What hurt the most was how strategic it all seemed, how he stripped me down slowly and made me doubt myself, question my worth. I stopped dressing up, stopped talking to friends. I would tiptoe around the house, always trying to avoid a fight and always trying to keep the peace. Then came the ultimate betrayal, the cheating. The cheating wasn't loud. It wasn't lipstick on a shirt or a random woman texting at 2 a.m. It was subtle, hidden in what he does every day. He started going out even more, claiming it was work dinners or meetings, started changing his passwords, putting his phone face down, and taking calls outside. The defensiveness, the way he'd flip the script and say I was being paranoid if I asked anything. Like I couldn't even say, "You're staying out later these days," without him turning it into a shouting match about how I was trying to control him. And that's when the gaslighting started in full force. He'd accuse me of being insecure. He'd say things like, "Just because you've let yourself go doesn't mean I'm cheating." Mind you, I hadn't let myself go. I was still maintaining myself, going to work, doing my hair, trying to feel alive. But when you hear something repeatedly, even lies start sounding like facts. I started believing I wasn't good enough anymore. Maybe he deserved better. Perhaps it was my fault. One Saturday, I decided to clean the guest room because a guest was coming for a weekend visit. As I went through the closet, I found an unfamiliar, light pink scarf with a strong perfume smell. It wasn't mine, and it definitely didn't belong to my husband. When I asked him about it, he gave me the most ridiculous explanation I've ever heard. "Oh, that? My colleague forgot it in the car, so I brought it in. I just tossed it in there." We both knew he was lying, but I nodded. I was too emotionally worn down to fight. I was too tired to argue with a man who made me feel crazy for asking simple questions. The actual confirmation didn't come until a few months later. A friend of mine, one of the few I still kept in touch with, messaged me on WhatsApp and said she saw him at a lounge on a work night with another woman. They were sitting in a corner booth, cozy, laughing, touching. He said they looked like a couple. I thanked her, locked myself in the bathroom, and cried. I started watching him differently. I started reading up on narcissistic behavior, emotional abuse, and trauma bonding. It was like a fog had been lifted. For the first time I could see the patterns, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the guilt tripping, and suddenly I wasn't crazy anymore. I wasn't overreacting. I was a woman being emotionally destroyed by a man who claimed to love her. But yet, I didn't leave. And then the worst happened. One evening he came home unusually early, very happy indeed. He sat down and casually said, "I've been thinking, maybe we should take a break. You could go stay with your family for a while." I should mention that he knew about my family situation. Also, I knew what he meant. He wanted me gone so he could bring her in. Maybe she was pressuring him. Maybe he was getting bold. Whatever it was, he was done pretending. But I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I told him I'd think about it and went straight to my friend's place to spend the night. And that was the first night I slept peacefully in months. I didn't move out immediately, but I started detaching. I got a separate bank account and stopped updating him about my whereabouts. I stopped caring about what he wanted for dinner, whether his shirts were ironed, or whether he noticed me at all. I became invisible. Slowly he noticed, but he said nothing. We just acted like two strangers in the house, and until now, I have yet to get closure on why he married me in the first place. I think I'll end here since it is getting incredibly long and I don't think I can complete the story right now, but I'll follow up with the second part as soon as I can. It's insane how they can flip the script and make you feel like the crazy one for just asking a simple question. It's wild how they make you question everything, even the stuff you know deep down isn't your fault. Emotional manipulation is the worst kind of slow death. Part 2. Now I'm back, and before I finish up the story, let me just say that what happened next wasn't planned. I didn't wake up one day and say, "Let me go ruin this man by falling for someone in his family." But life has a funny way of aligning stars when you think everything's falling apart. After the "maybe you should leave" conversation, I spent more time away from home. I'd visit friends I hadn't seen in years, catch up with my whistleblower of a friend who lived out of town, and honestly, just breathe. One weekend, I attended the wedding of one of my former classmates and ended up sitting at a table with some people I hadn't seen since college, including him. Let's call him Shane. Shane is my ex-husband's cousin. They were not close cousins, mind you. They didn't grow up in the same house or anything, but they shared a last name. I had actually met him a few times during my marriage, mostly during significant events or family gatherings, but we never really talked. He was always the quiet, slightly aloof guy in the corner with expensive cologne and a watch that probably cost more than my car. That night at the wedding, though, we got to talking. He remembered me. "You're his wife, right? So that's what you were dealing with all these years," he'd said, his tone polite. I didn't know then what he meant by the latter part of his statement. I just replied, "Technically, but not for much longer." We didn't exchange numbers that night, but the way we talked, laughed, and connected, it left an impression on me. I had never experienced this with him. Maybe my ex not breathing down my neck every second was a game changer. A few days later, he found me on Instagram, sent me a simple DM. "You looked beautiful that night. Hope you've been good." And like that, the spark ignited. I didn't dive in immediately. I wasn't ready to trust anyone that fast, especially not someone related to him. But he was patient, gentle, consistent. He wasn't loud or aggressive about his interest. He just kept showing up, texting, calling, and checking in. But not with that smothering behavior as my ex did. Slowly, I started to heal. I began to believe that I could be loved without being manipulated, that I could be seen, heard, and respected. Later, I learned from him that my ex had a reputation in the family for being arrogant and controlling. Shane told me stories about how even as a teenager, my ex always acted like he was better than everyone. They didn't get along either. My ex hated Shane for reasons Shane wasn't aware of. He even had tried to borrow money from Shane once and then refused to pay it back, claiming family doesn't keep tabs on each other. The same man who would later accuse me of mismanaging our joint account. Shane made it known amongst his friends that he was hitting on me. He didn't care that it might ruffle feathers. He didn't care that it might cause tension at the next family Christmas party. He wanted me, and he made it clear every single day. Meanwhile, my ex, he started noticing I was coming home once in a blue moon just to pick up a few things. I didn't know what clicked in his brain because he tried to reel me back in. I remember one night he cooked dinner, like actually cooked. Candlelight, soft music, wine. It was so out of character that I almost laughed. He sat me down and said, "I know I've made mistakes. I want to start over. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." I swear I was so shocked. In my wildest dreams, I would never have imagined such a thing happening. I didn't even answer him, and when he tried to get violent, I threatened to call the police. I had tasted peace, and I wasn't about to trade that for trauma wrapped in home-cooked lasagna. Eventually, I moved out. My place, at first, before Shane and I got serious enough to talk about living together. And before you ask, no, we didn't rush into anything. We took our time. He respected my pace, my therapy sessions, my fears, and my trust issues. He gave me room to be vulnerable, to cry without judgment, to heal without pressure. A year later, after a divorce breaking apart more than 3 years of marriage, which I came out of with just an okay amount of money from my ex, he proposed. Nothing flashy, just the two of us, a weekend trip to Bali, and the most straightforward question I've ever answered, "Will you marry me?" And I said yes. Now, here's the irony. My ex, the same man who said I'd never survive without him, showed up in my DMs 3 months after I posted the engagement photo, talking about how he's been reflecting, how everyone deserves a second chance, and how he's really happy for me, but wants to talk. I ignored it. I can recall him posting motivational quotes on Facebook like, "Sometimes you gotta lose everything to gain clarity." He then messaged Shane directly but was blocked. Last I heard, he was single and still working. But the divorce took a toll on him, and he's been asking people for money. Why? I'm not sure. However, I've gathered that his beloved girlfriend, the one he tried to replace me with, left him after he spent a lot on her. He's not at a difficult spot I might have hoped for. He's actually living quite comfortably. But he's still borrowing money, which leaves me confused about what's really going on with him. Though honestly, I don't care. Life has certainly come full circle. I didn't survive without him. I thrived without him. And every time I see Shane, who wakes up every morning and kisses my forehead like I'm a rare jewel, I thank God I didn't stay where I was and loved. Now, I'm not the type of woman who gets satisfaction from seeing someone suffer, at least not originally. I used to think karma handled itself quietly, like it would happen in the background, and I wouldn't even notice. But when I tell you that man's downfall played out like a reality show that aired exclusively for my healing, phew! I'm relieved and grateful that everything turned out well, without anyone getting seriously hurt or worse. It might seem a bit dramatic coming from me, but that is the truth. My ex was someone to be feared, and I think it took me a long time to understand the magnitude of his influence over me fully. You might remember when I spoke about the concept of closure regarding my marriage. Even though I didn't get the closure I initially sought from him, I had conversations with Shane that helped me make sense of my experiences. Shane helped me see that my marriage to my ex wasn't just a partnership. It felt more like an ego boost for him. It was like he carefully scouted me out. Maybe he could smell my vulnerability from a mile away, and the fact that I didn't have anywhere else to turn. I realized that he took advantage of my situation. He made me dependent on him to the extent that I couldn't think for myself. We didn't even date for an entire year before tying the knot, which, in hindsight, was a clever tactic on his part. By moving so quickly, he made sure that I wouldn't have the time or opportunity to think things through, or to really get to know his darker side. My ex swept me off my feet, literally. It's unsettling to believe that someone could be so calculating, but it's a reality I now accept. Shane also thinks my ex must have experienced a trauma that made him like that. Not an excuse, but if that was the case, I still do not sympathize with him. 2 years after the divorce, my ex is still out there trying to borrow money from all sources, and I'm engaged to a man who makes more in a month than my ex made in a year. With Shane, I am focusing on rebuilding my life on my own terms, free from the shadow of that past. It's a sign that you don't have to stick around and suffer. I did, but for those who have the power to leave, please do. That whole "I've been reflecting" act after everything he's put you through? I mean, come on. The man had the audacity to think you'd want to go back to the trauma that had you questioning your worth in the first place. He was manipulative and controlling, and now he's left with nothing but his own mess. And honestly, that's on him. Anyway, you didn't wait for someone else to rescue you. You rescued yourself, OP. All the best. Have you ever had a moment when you realized your peace was more important than holding on to a toxic relationship? And how did that shift change the way you approach love and self-worth? Thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.